Slides are ready to go behind. Okay. So, like I said. And everything will work right. And I will be right here. Well, you're going to be there. I'll be around. She'll be up there. I'll be on the place. That's right. This makes all this. Yeah, yeah.
Good evening. All right. Let's try that again. Good evening. I know I'm really annoying. Pastor Sarah, and I want to welcome you to Audubon Park Church, welcome you to this teach-in event today. We have started here. It's really a community thing. I guess it was maybe fueled by me getting really upset and angry and I posting something about somebody want to start a banned book library. And then a whole bunch of people in the community responded. And you see the results of it back in the back there and all the folks that have joined the community online and people who have given books from all across the United States and maybe further, I don't know for sure. There's kind of lots of things that have bloomed out of it, one of them being this evening. So I'm really thrilled that we get to share this space with you all this evening. I want to say hello to everyone online as well. Is the sound okay? I want to make sure. I don't know if they could do like thumbs ups maybe and thumbs up. Excellent. Thumbs up indeed. We're going to have this discussion, the teach-in portion in a little bit. But this is part of a national movement, by the way. There are folks gathering like this in probably like church basements and community halls and people's homes, et cetera, all over the United States right now. So I am so thrilled. Like this is a joint action, actually. So while we're gathering, there are many folks gathered all over doing the same thing. And part of it was also reading banned books, actually actively reading banned books together. So we're going to do that. We're going to read, don't worry, we're not going to be reading like a whole, we're not going to read the whole The Hate You Give tonight. So if you have a book report due on that, I'm sorry. But we're just going to read portions and a couple of shorter kids' books, which have plenty to teach us as well. So I think we're going to start, actually. I would like to invite a very special guest up. One of the people who was instrumental in teaching me to read, my mother, Julie Robinson, and she's going to read a book that is banned here in Florida, not in every county, but this book is actually banned here in Florida in some counties.
Started reading to her basically the day we brought her home from the hospital, by the way. My Princess Boy. Now, I don't know if people are.
I don't.
Okay. By Cheryl Killa Davis. My Princess Boy is 4 years old. He likes pretty things. Pink is his favorite color. He plays dress up in girly dresses. He dances like a beautiful ballerina. My Princess Boy has a cool brother. His brother plays baseball and soccer, and his brother dances with my Princess Boy. My Princess Boy loves his brother. So they're dancing. My Princess Boy loves his dad. His dad tells my Princess Boy how pretty he looks in a dress. His dad holds his hand and tells him to twirl. My Princess Boy smiles and hugs his dad. My Princess Boy has play dates with boys and girls. He likes to climb trees in his Princess Boy tiara crown. When he plays dress up, he likes to change clothes a lot. He wears a green ballet leotard and dances with his friends. He has a wand with a star and sparkles too. I love my Princess Boy. When we go shopping, he's the happiest when looking at girls' clothes. But when he says he wants to buy a pink bag or a sparkly dress, people stare at him. And when he buys girl things, they laugh at him and then they laugh at me. It hurts us both. Once, my princess boy wore a dress at his birthday party. He welcomed his friends to his home and he said, "I am a princess boy." He put on jewelry and he liked how pretty he looked and waved his princess boy wand. And then my princess boy was a princess for Halloween. He went trick-or-treating with his brother. One woman laughed at him because he was in a princess dress. My princess boy asked, "Why did she laugh at me?" I told him some people don't think boys should wear dresses. But a princess boy can wear a dress at his school, and I will not laugh at him. And a princess boy can wear pink, and I will tell him how pretty he looks. A princess boy can play with me in pretty girl clothes, and I will still play with him. If you see a princess boy, will you laugh at him? Will you call him a name? Will you play with him? Will you like him for who he is?
Thank you, Mom. Just going to read a couple of pages from a beautiful graphic novel called Genderqueer, and then a book that has principles no matter if you are 0 or 110, Anti-Racist Baby. And then we'll bring up one of our speakers here this evening. All right. So this is a section of the graphic novel talking about somebody wanting to ask people to use different pronouns than people would typically expect, perhaps, and worrying about that. It says, asking people to start using new pronouns for me seems like such a huge request, though. I know people will mess up, and then what do I do? If I correct someone, will they get mad? I'd love to use these pronouns, but I don't want to inconvenience people. And then the other character responds, so instead of asking people to do something to make you feel more comfortable, you'd rather just feel a little uncomfortable all the time? You'd rather internalize and carry that discomfort every time someone who loves you misgenders you? Well, when you put it that way, as I pondered a pronoun change, I began to think of gender less as a scale and more as a landscape. Some people are born in the mountains, while others are born by the sea. Some people are happy to live in the place they were born, while others must make a journey to reach the climate in which they can grow and flourish. Between the ocean and the mountains is a wild forest. That is where I want to make my home. So that's from Genderqueer by Maya Kobabe. I'm not sure. Oh, excuse me. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing her last name right, but Genderqueer, a memoir, Maya Kobabe. And Anti-Racist Baby by Ibram X. Kendi. This is the board book version. We also have like the version that's just more paper, but this is the board book version. So you can start them off early and you don't have to worry about them chewing up the pages, I guess. Babies are taught to be racist or anti-racist. There's no neutrality. Take these 9 steps to make equity a reality. I wish I could show you sorry, everybody, you can't. You just have to pick the book up. 1, Open your eyes to all skin colors. Anti-racist baby learns that all the colors, not because race is true. If you claim to be colorblind, you deny what's right in front of you. 2, use your words to talk about race. No one will see racism if we only stay silent. If we don't name racism, it won't stop being so violent. 3, point at policies as the problem, not people. Some people get more while others get less because policies don't always grant equal access. 4, shout, "There's nothing wrong with the people." Great. This is interactive. It's great. Even though all races are not treated the same, we are all human, anti-racist baby can proclaim. 5, celebrate all our differences. Anti-racist baby doesn't see certain groups as better or worse. Anti-racist baby loves a world that's truly diverse. 6, knock down the stack of cultural blocks. Anti-racist baby appreciates how groups speak, dance, and create as they choose. Anti-racist baby welcomes all groups voicing their unique views. 7, confess when being racist. Nothing disrupts racism more than when we confess that the racist ideas that we sometimes express. 8, grow to be anti-racist. Anti-racist baby is always learning, changing, and growing. Anti-racist baby stays curious about all people and isn't all knowing. 9, believe we shall overcome racism. Anti-racist baby is filled with the power to transcend, my friend, and don't judge a book by its cover, but read until the end. Thank you. Well, I'm going to invite Nikki Freed up, and she's going to introduce our 2 speakers this evening.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you for all our folks online and for Pastor Sarah and the African American Policy Forum that put all of this together. Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw's work is such a shining light and inspires all of us. And I'm really thankful that we can gather in this shared space together that is much bigger than just where we are. And it is a great joy of mine to introduce you to my friend, Shan-Estelle Brown. She is an anthropology scholar, as well as an amazing community activist and organizer. And Dr. Julian Chambliss is joining us via Zoom in another state, an incredible scholar of texts as well. I'm going to welcome Dr. Brown up to the lectern, and I'm going to share Dr. Chambliss online, and we'll have a whole community talk. Thank you so much for welcoming her.
Hi, everybody. I just have one thing that I want to read as an intro, which is George Takei's They Called Us Enemy, about his family's experience and the families of many Japanese American families in the internment camps. On May 1944, 1 year and 7 months after arriving at Rower, we were being relocated again. That train will reach Tule Lake in about 5 days. This time because of my parents' answers on those fateful questions. Mama, why is everyone so sad? People say goodbye. They may not see each other again. I remember looking out that train window. I saw the sad faces of people who had become friends. Those black barracks had become home. Those same guard towers that had once terrified me had become part of the landscape. As the train pulled away from the platform and the life we'd come to know, fear of the unknown became unbearable. Camp Tule Lake was a lot different than Rower, not one layer of barbed wire fence, but 3. The government had converted it into a maximum security segregation camp for disloyals, guarded by battle-ready troops, machine gun towers, and even tanks. George, why did we have to move here? Because mommy and daddy are no-nos. Oh, what's a no-no? A minority of people applied, like our parents, many others had responded no, no on the loyalty questionnaire. A minority of people applied for repatriation, but few wanted to be sent to a war-torn Japan. So we ended up here. So I'm Shan-Estelle Brown. I'm wearing this Yale t-shirt because I am a proud Yale graduate, like our governor. And I just kind of wear it to point out that you can go to an institution, but you have to take the tools that you learned there and you can go in a whole variety of different directions. So we can switch over to the PowerPoint part now. So we're switching gears now to kind of give you just an understanding of what's happening as far as the AP in African American Studies is concerned, because when you get just kind of these snippets online or from friends, it can be hard to figure out, well, what actually is the issue here? And so that's why we put these slides together. So this part is just called Demystifying the College Board AP course in African American Studies. What's it all about? So if we can switch to the next slide. Show of hands if anybody in the room has taken AP courses before. I took many of them. Good, a few hands here. No, Scott, no AP for you? So the AP stands for Advanced Placement, and the way College Board describes themselves, right, is that they are a not-for-profit corporation that helps students learn and also have the potential to receive college credit. And as they write, they provide opportunities, and there are actually 38 exams currently that they offer in a whole variety of subject matters for high school students. They also offer a series of standardized tests. That's actually how they make their bread, right? Is that they offer standardized tests for things like SAT, their advanced placement. And so in exchange for receiving a score, that a college could offer you the ability to receive college credit to replace an elective, or you could receive advanced placement, right? So if you could already prove that you spoke enough French, that you could then place into higher French level courses when you get to college. Next slide. I just want to point out that none of us work for College Board. I mean, I would love to have their money, but one of the things that kind of becomes an issue is that when they create these standardized tests, they are creating the standard for what is considered, it becomes almost canonical, right? As far as what's considered what matters for that particular subject. So the way they describe the African American Studies course is that the course is designed to offer high school students an evidence-based introduction to African American studies. And it's designed to be interdisciplinary. It's designed, it's been in production as a curriculum for several years now with a whole variety of scholars across the country. And their contributions created a version of the curriculum that ultimately has been submitted to different states and is being piloted in classrooms right now. And so again, I think it's important to stress the interdisciplinary nature of it, but also to explore the vital contributions and experiences of African Americans. You can go on to the next slide. Okay, and so as far as the timeline is concerned, you may have already heard that Florida, the Department of Education, rejected it, but as you can see, this is actually just one piece of their timeline, right? So they're piloting right now at 60 schools across the country. Their plan is for students to take their first exams in spring of 2024, so about a year from now. Ultimately, all schools, I'm going to put an asterisk on that because maybe it may not happen here in Florida, we don't know, would begin offering the AP course in African American Studies, and then also the exam would be available. The College Board says by about 2025. One thing that is interesting is that you don't actually need to have taken a course in order to sit for the exam or to pay for the exam and to take the exam. And so that may be a potential workaround that may happen here in Florida. Next slide, please. Okay, so I want to just give you a really brief timeline of pieces. So in June, HB 7 went into effect. And of course, HB 7 is a very long bill. They all are. But I want to point out this particular piece, which is relevant to the AP course. So classroom instruction and curriculum may not be used to indoctrinate or persuade students to a particular point of view inconsistent with the principles that they enumerated inside the bill. And so that means then that when the AP for African American Studies was submitted to the Florida Department of Education, the Department of Education found it to be in violation of this new law. So what happened after that is the state of Florida wrote to the College Board and said, are you going to make what you submitted compliant? And then the stories differ. The stories differ as far as who said what or did what or wrote what letter or what, kind of letter, and how many versions of the curriculum were submitted and things like that. So what Florida originally said, and this infographic is actually theirs, that they rejected the AP in January of this year by saying, the content of this course is inexplicably contrary to Florida law, so speaking to HB 7, and significantly lacks educational value. In the future, should College Board be willing to come back to the table with lawful, historically accurate content, FDOE will always be willing to open the discussion. And so the list here is a little bit hard to see, but they identify specific topics in the curriculum that they consider to be in violation of HB 7 in particular. And so that would be things like the fact that there's the existence of Black queer studies, the fact that it addresses intersectionality, the fact that it addresses Black feminism, the fact that it raises the topic of reparations, and that also it has a lot of contemporary pieces like discussing movements like Black Lives Matter and other contemporary movements happening right now. You can switch to the next slide. So what I want to show you here is that then there's like this kind of versioning issue, right? So the version that got leaked to the press is the one on the left, which was the fall 2022 pilot course guide. And it describes a set of course goals that include things like providing an understanding of, I can't read it actually from here. So one that stands out is the second bullet that says, identify the intersections of race, gender, and class, as well as connections between Black communities in the United States and the broader African diaspora in the, thank you, past and present, all of that ran together in the past and present. And so what happened was College Board did submit a revision of that curriculum that I'm using air quotes here that everybody knew about, but it's not everybody, in February of 2023. And that removed a lot of these items. So that upset many of the scholarly community who wanted the version on the left and all of those pieces to essentially stay in it. So there's multiple fights happening, I guess you can say, on different fronts, where you have the scholars who are like, well, we care more about the topics that are in this curriculum. We are not necessarily pro College Board, but we have to support them to the extent that we want it to read the way it needs to read in order for students to truly understand the experience of African Americans in this country. So we want the fall 22 version and not the one that seems to have been watered down later. So obviously there's more versions than that, but it's kind of these two that become the touch points. You can go to the next slide. Okay, and so then there's a removal, right, as part of that revision. So again, the Black feminism piece comes out, the intersectionality comes out, and these are not just topics, these are people, right? These are people who are connected, who have written the theory and have done the research that is related to these topics. And so that is why you see the removal, right? College Board argues that they didn't get fully removed, that they also kind of got moved to the optional reading sections, that if you really dig, you can find some of them, but sometimes you can't. And so again, it becomes this issue of what do we really want students to know? And so again, what was removed and what was altered are these topics of reparations, these topics about mass incarceration. And then also it says the unit on Black feminist, the Black feminist movement and womanism was changed to Black women and movements in the 20th century. The words sound similar, but the impact is actually very different. So what I'm showing you is that fall 22 set of topics, just so that you can get a sense for what the scholarly community is fighting for right now. The AP course is designed to take place over an entire year and designed to fit into, essentially over a high school academic year, and starts with the African diaspora, an understanding of the wealth and power that was in Africa long before colonization happened, and then moves into Unit 2, which is talking about the transatlantic slave trade. Some of these topics here on resistance, talking about culture, talking about the institution of slavery. And then if you want to switch to the next one. So talking about liberation, and certainly in the ways that people liberated themselves before emancipation, right? And then also looking at Reconstruction heading essentially into the 20th century. And then the very last unit is looking at series of movements, right? And so looking at, again, see, here is the Black feminism, womanism, and intersectionality. Here is so diversity within Black communities seems to have stayed, but then contemporary debates, I think, fell off. Black power and Black pride, I think, are still there, but rephrased a little bit differently. So as you can see, this is the set, right, over the series of weeks that is of interest. So I'm going to stop here. And Julian, would you like to say a few words, and then we'll head into Q&A?
Sure. I think obviously for scholars of race and ethnicity, African-American studies, this is a very troubling time, in part because as we will recall, those scholarly conversations are actually directly tied to the rights revolutions of the 50s and 60s. So much of the work that you see under attack and sort of process of trying to be eliminated or suppressed is actually a direct inheritor of the ways that educational institutions in the United States had to wrestle with the effects of grassroots activism around civil rights, starting in the 1950s. And this was a wholesale transformation. And it's important because, of course, it was directly in opposition to a decade of writing of history, in particular, and descriptions of culture that aided and abetted in the process of creating a sort of segregated society. As a person who has a degree in history, I always have to live with the shame of the Dunning School, which was a school of thought out of Columbia University by Charles Dunning, who was a professor there, who basically wrote and supported with his graduate students a narrative of Southern history that justified the rise of Jim Crow and the brutal nature of Jim Crow segregation in the South, it really supported a racist retelling of the Civil War and Reconstruction was really detrimental to African Americans and their political and social consequences. The revision of those narratives starting in really the 1950s with scholars like Kenneth Going, almost all of them white, and the push on the part of African American students and white students indeed as well to integrate ethnic studies. And it's important to say it's ethnic studies, not just simply African Americans, although African American studies or Black studies were on the tip of the spear in a lot of ways. It was really an attempt on the part of academia to tell a story of the United States and the people in it in a way that reflected their actual lived experience, and not just simply mythologies that tend to affirm practices and policies that discriminated and injured. And so this in many ways is sort of settled history for academics, but it is also one of the places that sort of conservative reactions against the sort of progressive policies of the 1960s were often at the very first a consideration. If you think about the sort of reactionary trends that emerged in the 1970s, many of those trends had to do with many conservative forces or reactionary forces targeting the college classroom, targeting theory and practice coming from higher ed as detrimental to quote unquote American values, detrimental to quote unquote families, and using that logic to create their own alternative ecosystem around education, their own alternative ecosystem around policy and practice. These were very important parts of the effort on the conservative side of the sort of political spectrum to sort of marginalize and demonize at some level the sort of critical reflections that are represented by academic discourse. So in some ways, we are living with the consequences of really decades upon decades of consistent effort on the part of sort of reactionary forces around education. That is always been a question on a college campus, but it's increasingly become like really a crucial part of control more broadly as it's sort of pushed into school boards and school curricula across the United States. And this too started a long time ago from my perspective, but in many ways a very recent phenomenon in the sense that battles over history standards, battle over historiography, what is included, how is it included, those were things that really became a crucial part of the quote unquote culture wars of the 1990s. So this idea of a history standard, or the ideas of there are certain kinds of history that are hostile to the American culture, hostile to American identity, or hostile to American patriotism. Those are ideas that were a part and parcel of large debates about history standards. And again, many of the people who were involved in those debates are still in Congress and still involved in politics. So in some ways, we are dealing with a long history of sort of reaction and resistance related to dealing with the critiques being offered by people from the margins about their lived experience in the ways that are sort of historical and cultural debates are sort of systematically erasing them, in part because that aids in their marginalization. And so it's an important discussion to have. It's also important to recognize that it is a concerted effort on the part of really, a limited number of actors at sometimes with money and time and a commitment to sort of like targeting seemingly low-hanging fruit that allows to create a culture where you can increasingly marginalize people's ability to talk about the past or talk about their lived experience in a way that reflects the reality of the things they've gone through. That's it, sorry.
I fully agree with everything you just said. Shall we move on to the Q&A? No, I fully agree with everything he said. Well, one of the questions that I had written was essentially, is this more of the same, or is there something different? You know, are there some particular differences that you see happening here? I think that you probably addressed that, Julian, but is there any, do you see any, is there, you know, any difference in the way that you see this kind of struggle happening, or any kind of, I don't know, is there anything different that you see happening with this particular time period?
Sure, I think, you know, while it perhaps doesn't seem as directly connected, the fact of the matter is that, you know, these previous debates about education and policy, they were often set in third parties or policy spaces. And one of the things that has allowed the sort of the contemporary set of circumstances to be the way they are is because the legislatures in most states are really gerrymandered now. And so there has been like a really consistent effort on a part of sort of reactionary forces, I would argue, to target cultural issues. So these are policy issues, or these are policy issues that are, you know, tied to religion or tied to questions of faith in particular, and marshal in a way to marshal the vote. And that vote is taking place in congressional districts and in spaces that are highly partisan, right? So in some ways, these previous decades, when we were having these debates, the distance between the far right and the far left wasn't that far. Now, when you have these debates, the distance between the right and the left is like the distance between the sun and Pluto. Like, it's really far apart, right? And the people who've been elected have been elected at some level by being really extreme, and they're not willing at some level, I think arguably they're not willing to quote unquote compromise. Like they have moral absolutes as benchmarks to activism, right? Like, you know, they don't have like reasoned arguments per se. They have absolute arguments that are rooted in things they believe, but may or may not actually be tied to any kind of understanding of theory. Like, I mean, like, intersectionality is a prime example of this. You know, technically intersectionality is really kind to people because it's a theory that talks about your actions are informed by a set of externalities that shape your ability to like reason. So if you like are aware, you can see a way to be better. So it's not saying that like everyone is inherently bad. It's saying like you're in a system, and that intersecting layers of practice in that system create bad outcomes, and you can change that. So while, you know, in the rhetoric, intersectionality is like this horrible thing, it's really like saying like, oh, no, you can be better. You just need to see the system and the way that the system is marginalizing people. Like, it's like the kindest version of like a theory that you can imagine. So it's always, I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh because it's really, I'm like, no one ever reads it. They just like hear someone yell about it. I'm like, not read it? Like, I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I can add that the most recent news is that Florida might create its own alternative to the College Board style exams, right? One of the most recent things is that the budget, there may have now been created a line for the budget of a couple $2 million to investigate creating their own version of these exams. And so I guess, are there some potential advantages and disadvantages to this is what I'm thinking about right now. Julian, do you have anything you want to say about that?
Not that I ain't snarky.
Fair enough. So I guess we'll go from here into, there are questions? What? No, I don't. I want to hear these questions. I don't think I have answers, but I know Julian does. There's actually, he had a hand, right?
Okay, I've got somebody I'm going to ask this one on the chat first, and then
Okay.
we can go to the room here.
Perfect.
Matthew Robinson is my brother.
Oh, okay. Hi,
asked-
Matthew.
So we're really keeping it tight in the family tonight here.
Yay!
And I know your mom was here too.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
All right, fam.
They're also backup, basically.
Yeah, that's
Yeah. Yeah.
What can someone that has no kids do to best help with this issue if we are already on board with the full access to these classes being taught?
That's a really good question. I don't have any kids, but I teach children, right? Or I guess they're adults. But for me, I think I would not see not having children as a deficit to having a voice and an opinion in this conversation, right? Your paternity or maternity actually has nothing to do with wanting more for the future adults that you are going to interact with as a citizen and for them as citizens. And so you have a dog in this fight. I should stop making that analogy. But I guess what I would say is there are plenty of ways to be involved, right? That you can be a part of the school board. You can't use the narrative of being a mother, right? Or a parent, but there are other narratives that you can use. There are plenty of ways to advocate. I mean, I've been continuously impressed and surprised by the power of social media to leverage opinions into being amplified by this tool. Julian, what do you want to add?
Yeah, I would agree. I would say that, from a structural standpoint, volunteer at your school and run for the school board and be involved with the sort of educational institutions at the local level as much as possible. It is important to recognize that those actions create space for the administrators and the teachers who don't agree. Because remember, one of the most under pressure groups, under resourced groups, and most vulnerable groups in the United States are teachers, right? Like they don't really get a lot of support, and they face an ever increasing level of difficulty in accomplishing their jobs, both in terms of health and safety. I mean that literally, mental health and mental safety, and physical health and physical safety. And they are under-resourced, meaning not compensated in a manner that you would imagine if people really love the kids as much as they say they do. I would, really ask them to consider the pay scale of the kids, the kids' teachers. Those are really fundamental things, and it's super important to recognize that the groups, often the margins around success and failure in elections and things like that are closer than we want to realize, especially at the local level. So it's super important to be aware where candidates stand on these issues, especially issues around information fluency and accuracy. Those are increasingly questions that we have to wrestle with. So those basic support, both in person, holding your elected officials accountable, advocating for policies that help teachers and support teachers. Those are all really important steps that you can take.
Thank you so much. And support libraries. Question?
Hi, I'm not sure it's a question or maybe it's a digression, but I'm just comparing the tone and the rhetoric and the actions today to what Florida had this similar thing happening in the 70s, which I think they took their eye off the civil rights movement a little bit in the 70s, and they were extremely frightened about something that was, the conservatives are always looking for something to be frightened of. And at that time, they were extremely frightened of communism. So the state of Florida created a unique course, I don't know if it was anywhere else in the country, called Americanism versus Communism, that was required to be taught in 11th and 12th grades. Yeah, if you've took it, you're nodding, you remember it. And it's an interesting construct, right? It's not capitalism versus communism or capitalism versus socialism. It's Americanism versus communism. And it was this course that the syllabus was there, and it was a very carefully structured course to explain communism through a particular lens, so you could actually check a box but not really give people or give students any more information. You're controlling the amount of information. What's fearful is if Florida does enact something that's an alternative to college boards, it opens that up to all parts of scholarship, not just that. So the fear is that and that was an extremely conservative governor. I think it was Hayden Burns at the time who did that. Now we have this much more shrill, almost desperate reactionary move. What is the next step that needs to happen to prevent that?
To prevent which part?
I don't.
I guess one thing that I'm thinking about is that fear can always be used as a strong motivator, right? And we have seen that over and over again. I've been kind of digging into this particular alternative, and the exam that at least was talked about in the article, it already exists, but it's already used in Florida. And so I don't know if it's called like some sort of classical exam, and it mirrors the SAT as far as its broad kind of verbal reasoning and critical thinking as far as what it's claiming to measure. I had never heard of this particular exam before, and it is limited to a few colleges that already offer credit. So I guess perhaps the goal might be to essentially cut out the College Board and to offer money to this other company as their competitor, although I don't know if they're really competing with each other, to provide these kinds of exams. But then it would also require changing some of the kind of regulations at the state level to allow credit, right? Because it's about the credit and what is it worth? Because for students, from their perspective, if I don't get anything for it, then it's not even worth taking. So there has to be some also incentivizing or made into the only possible option, right? And so that, I guess, is a possible avenue that then perhaps maybe no AP courses might be offered. That sounds a little extreme, but I feel like all things are on the table at the moment. Julian, do you want to add anything, and then we'll go to another question?
Yeah, I don't think obviously the challenge here is that the AP course about blackness is the question. It's not like an AP course about history or European history, because there's AP American history, there's AP European history.
I took those.
I took that, right? Yeah, I took AP courses. And no one, and this black thing, the AP history course, by the way. And just so what the AP Black Studies course is doing is just telling you about theorizing related to Black experience, right? Like that's the problem with it. It's not that it's an AP course. So the idea of like, oh, we're just gonna give them another course, that's a really detrimental thing in terms of the marketplace for Florida students. Like, so the first thing to say is like, you're undermining my kid's ability to be competitive in the marketplace. Now, granted, you're saying that in an environment where like education is being devalued pretty steeply, pretty regularly. So it's a point to make, but you're making it in a house that's already on fire. So there's that. But it is true that you're really limiting the ability of students from Florida to be competitive in the educational marketplace. And you have to assume, although the language and rhetoric associated with these things does not assume it, that some of the kids in Florida might want to go to school someplace else. Like that's the thing. You are literally limiting their ability to go to school outside the state. Now, while that may not seem important to some of the people making these arguments, it is detrimental for actual students, right? Like it is literally impinging on their ability to be successful later in life. And so like that's a legitimate argument to make. The broader, point about the nature of the reactionary politic, again, it does go back to how much of these policies and practice are effectively marshaling and getting people out to vote, right? Because enough people, engaged in the marketplace of voting, right? And getting some people who are more moderate, at the current time, so many policies are so extreme, even some Republicans recognize this isn't really a viable policy given the way you constructed it. And that describes a lot of laws written in Florida recently. They're so vague, they're so broad, they're so fill in whatever descriptive yeah, they're not super effective. But they do something that's very important to the people who are writing them, and that is they terrify people and they cause stress. That's what they do. And so your number one response is like, you're not going to terrify me and I'm going to sue you, or I'm going to engage you in the ballot box in a very real way. And I think that that's a legitimate practice, right? Because the idea that these practices, these policies are helping students, that is not the case. Especially in the case of the AP course, who is that helping? Right? Like who is it helping to say, oh, you can't teach this AP course? Because it's not like you're forcing people to take an AP African American history course. No one gets forced to take an AP course. You only do it when you're nerdy. Right? Like it's a voluntary thing. So you're so afraid of the idea that someone might teach you Black things that you prevent them from even having the option. Like that's, yeah.
Figuring getting up takes longer than it used to. Basically, I wanted to ask, it's almost asking for a ray of hope. I happen to be reading today that apparently an AP pre-calculus course of some kind is being questioned by the governor. I didn't think I thought he worshiped STEM like everybody else, but it has to do with, well, you wouldn't go along with me, so they're, which I'm sorry, I get to say that about him because he's, what's the word, jerk. The point is, I noticed that they were saying people may end up taking the prior course just to get the information. It would not be that children would sign up for advanced placement calculus and not be denied their education so that somebody in Idaho might think, boy, he's better than Trump, which is why we're doing this, okay? Now, hopefully in AP studies, African American studies, the ability for now to go over is are there things that kids can do to push forward to get into courses that will at least give them equivalent information and allow him to nominal victory. But it comes down to, by the way, with regard to the alternative placement test, we need 2 hours and a pot of coffee. The man is totally off the wall. Okay. It is embarrassing for me to be a white man in Florida right now, because as far as the rest of the country is concerned, we're a bunch of silly little weenies who will make it against the law to disagree with us. I mean, come on. And so the point that I want, is there the hope, because the only real hope is to get everybody out to vote and get rid of this and start again. But are there ways to help the children get the stuff they need, whether or not it's called what it's called or not?
Sure. I mean, there are lawsuits happening now, right? There are a set of students who are suing the state over the rejection, this kind of preliminary first round rejection of this course. And so that, of course, still has to kind of play out. I would say that probably from the Department of Education's perspective, would say, well, we're still waiting for the version that you're going to give us that's going to be compliant with our laws. And so when they see that, then they will review it and then they may reject it again. As far as workarounds are concerned, like I was saying, you don't have to have a course. You don't have to take a course in order to pay for and take an AP exam. So if, there was an opportunity to have students learn on their own, right, and sit for the exam at the same time that other students were taking it, because it happens at, certain times of the year, that is a possibility and may have to be one of our workarounds in the state of Florida.
Yeah, that's sort of the issue I was going to ask. Do parents or students have recourse to resources, either online or sent to them paper-wise? They actually can read the materials and then sit for the course on their own. I mean, is that permissible? I mean, is there some place to write to that parents can request this from the College Board? We'd like the course materials or access to a link where we can get the AP course materials?
I think that's something that we should be able to do. One thing that I can also just add is that I'm not doing it this year, but I regularly do interviews with high school students who are applying to Yale, right? And they love to talk about the AP courses that they're in. It is the thing that they want to tell me about. They are proud, they are excited about the in-depth learning that they are doing. And I know that the particular parents and families who are applying to elite colleges and things is a subset of all of the families who are in Florida. But I also know that I have the feeling that these families in particular would not take kindly to anybody denying anything to their children. And so I feel like we should be able to use that as leverage. Nikki.
In fact, we are offering the class here. The materials are widely available at, like Shan-Estelle shared in the PowerPoint, and we're building a easy website so that anybody that wants to work through the process, they can. And we're going to offer it for free here in the summer. That will obviously be shorter because it's designed to be like a 20-week class or whatever, 36-week class. And then we'll offer it again in the fall. We have a QR code we're going to show you at the end, and you can sign up for it. It's any student, anybody here, Florida, wherever. It's going to be online. Yeah, online too, right? Because we agree with you that people should have access to the information, but not just access to the information, also access to like educated scholars who have backgrounds in this material and great fluency and depth in I'm not stopping you from sharing it. but yeah, do you have a question?
I attended a conference not too long ago, and one of the people in attendance, there were people from school boards around the state, and one person who attended was Karen Castor-Dental, who is the Orange County School Board representative for this district. And I told her about the banned book library, and I didn't know yet about the African American Studies program that you're working on here, but she said you all need to come to the school board meetings and you need to speak up and tell us what you're doing. her fellow board members and the board chair need to hear this from people's, firsthand experience. I mean, I told her that, I don't have a school-age child. My daughter's 35 years old, and she and my son-in-law, who are both native Floridians, moved to Silicon Valley for job opportunities with the intention of coming back to Florida. And now I'm ticked off because they're planning to start a family and they're not coming back because of what's happening in the Florida schools. And those are things that school boards need to hear. And they're things that your representatives and at the state level need to hear. Regardless of whether they're our district or not, we need to be calling these people and writing to them and just telling them what they're doing to the schools. Because I don't really think that they care that African American Studies program isn't in the school. I think that they're out to destroy public schools, to privatize them. I mean, they're not going to offer those kinds of courses at the college level. So why would they care if there's a high school level course, for high school students? So I just want to encourage everyone to write, to call, to go to school board meetings. Just get mad.
Did you want to add something? Yeah. Well, what?
Well, yeah, and then did you also have? Okay.
Okay, I agree with everything that you said, and I agree with everything you said, and I think we do need to vote folks out. But I also want to go back to the question that your son asked about how we could help. And I'm an early childhood elementary teacher. I've been teaching for probably almost 50 years, and I still work with children after school, and I do Black history books and readers theater and other people that I want the children to know about, and they are excited. So I think back in the civil rights era, there were freedom schools. We have to make places to teach these kids what the history is, all the kids. And I'm a part of the Seminole County, and we just helped scan all the books in for the, and now that they have the list of books, we're not going to be able to bring any new books in. And we weren't even able to bring any new books in this year anyway. So we have to, as you say, go to the school board. We have to build relationships with people in schools and infiltrate. But we have to really help these younger children, because if they're not successful in school, they're not going to get to take an AP class. So we have to start with young children. So that's my.
Thank you. Is there someone else that wanted to speak? You want to go to the end of the slide?
Yeah, we'll just go to the QR code.
Lisa asked, what books would you recommend, both of you, that we add to our library, our banned book library here? It's actually called Right to Read, Audubon Park Community Library. That's the name of our library now. To provide an overview of Black American history. And she also added, these books may not be available in the school library. So I don't know if you just have off the top of your head any ideas. That's a harder question sometimes.
The first thing I always look at is the new Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, but I'm gonna actually hand that over to Julian.
That's a good one, the new Jim Crow. Paul Ortiz has a Latinx and Black history of the United States. That's a really good book. John Hope Franklin is probably the best known sort of classical in the recent memory Black history historian. He has a number of textbooks that he wrote. So if you're looking for like a decent textbook about Black history, John Hope Franklin has written that book. At some level, I think there are a lot of like Black reading lists sort of floating around on the web, and for questions that are really critical to the concerns that are driving these efforts, you know, I would definitely read or view Kimberly Crenshaw's sort of TED Talk on intersectionality, for instance. She has actually a lot of really short videos where she explains it. Robin D.G. Kelly, Freedom Dreams is the book that really sort of calls attention to sort of the Black political imagination, and that book is really great. I think Eric Foner, who's a white historian of Civil War, has written a lot of great books sort of talk about Reconstruction. And again, one of the things that's really some level frightening, but not necessarily surprising, is the much of the practices that you see sort of being implemented now are really paralleling practices that we might associate with the efforts on the part of Southern Democrats during Reconstruction. So this sort of like effort to push Black people out of the public sphere, the effort to rewrite the history to sort of support their version of events, right? Like the creation of a kind of alternate narrative about the South, slavery, and the experience of the war. All of those were things that were done as part and parcel of like a kind of like thought control that was in part and parcel, as I said earlier, an attempt to create a sort of segregated society. And when you look at some of the things that are happening now, they really tread across very similar grounds. You know, rewriting the history to fit what we want, vilifying and marginalizing Black and white and whoever who might dare say something different. The threat of violence, quite frankly, also very similar to that period. So in some ways, we're repeating a really dark chapter in our history. And I think it's difficult for people to sort of recognize that, but from a kind of like structural standpoint, erasing a history you don't like, you know, attacking politicians that might dare disagree with you by calling them things like pedophiles or saying that they're groomers, or like really using this language that makes their moral character suspect and then opens them up to a kind of attack and harassment. These are all practices and that we can attach to like these very, very dire moments in American history. And so it's important to recognize that those things were only overcome by real collective efforts on the part of the public to hold the government accountable, to force policy that aligned with the maintaining and ensuring the rights of people. And so, you know, the lessons of Reconstruction aren't all good because, of course, you know, we did get Jim Crow, but there is no reason why we need to like go back into that dark period. Like we are fully aware and have history on our side, right? Like we know that these things can be overcome because they were before. So I would say that being involved at the school board and these sort of low level boards, they have been very important in terms of like creating an environment that is fertile for extremism in a way, right? You really do need to like think about every one of those seats as space where someone can have it who, you know, believes in facts and wants people to be educated, or someone can have it who don't believe in fact and don't want people to be educated. And like you need to pick which one you want it to be. Right? Like that you just need to pick which one you want it to be.
All right, what's on the screen right now, that funny looking box with the funny looking boxes in it, is a QR code. It was also on all the advertisements for this event online. That goes to essentially a Google form that you can fill out to express that you are interested. We're still developing the course. We're still developing the details, so we don't quite have everything in place. But to get on the list with your contact information when we're ready to, you know, start registration for the course. So this is kind of a pre-registration form. Or If you're like, I don't do that, Sarah, I don't do all of that stuff, you also can email Nikki. Each one free one at gmail.com. Each one free one at gmail.com. So you can also email that account and say, I am very interested in keeping in the loop about this upcoming class. And share that. We'll maybe develop a secondary poster that kind of just talks about the class and has this QR code. We'll share it in the Facebook group. We'll share it in the Facebook event about this. So later tonight, I will make that happen. And then you can take that and you can share that widely. You can download that picture and keep sharing it with folks. Does that sound good? So that we've got something that we can keep sharing until we actually have the course up and running. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm gonna get out of this one more time. I'm gonna stop sharing for just a moment. Thank you to both of you and for everyone for showing up. We're so grateful. Julian, for coming in from Michigan. We wish you were still here, but glad you could be here this way tonight. Thank you so much for sharing. Oh my gosh, Annalise, I really, really am so grateful. I did not know a lot of that. Maybe should have read some more articles before I came tonight, but we luckily had you here.
I read the article, so you didn't have to.
Yeah, thank you. Back in the back, we do have our present library. It's not quite up and running officially yet. We just got our name a little while ago, and everybody that's helping do this have very full lives. So we're getting things ready as quick as possible. However, here's what I'm going to tell you. If you would like, if there's a book back there and you're like, I really want to borrow this book. I'm going to get a little sheet of paper. If you can just write the book, because we don't quite have ourselves organized down. Write the name of the book that you're borrowing and maybe like your phone number. You don't even have to write your name and phone number if you want on that sheet. And then can you bring it back when you're done with it? All right. Does that sound good? Okay. Thanks everyone for coming. Everyone online as well. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful night.
Thanks, Julian.
Take it easy.
All right. I'll talk to you later.
All right. Bye.
Bye, Julian.
Bye.
Good night.